Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. No countdown today, just going straight at it because we've got a jam-packed show. Haven't started the pod recording yet, so hop on in to the live stream. This is just for us on the YouTube. On the YouTube, how old am I?
The MLS, the YouTube,
the Major League Soccer. It's a weird week because there's a lot going on, but at the same time, there's a lot of frustration in the fan base. There's a lot of there's a lot of anticipation about the transfer window that we'll get to. There's a lot of frustration in how we played last week, and I think that's clouding a lot of the work that's been done under Critchley. So I don't know. It feels like a weird week. Am I alone in that, Stu?
No, I think also the U.S. game this week kind of shifted attention off of City for a little bit, and now we're kind of doing a hard shift back. If it was a home game on Saturday, I think that would make things even more jarring.
That's true. Yeah. It being an away game, second away game in a row, it kind of, I don't know, things feel a little bit like removed almost. And it's kind of odd.
Yeah, and we also had our week bye fairly recently too, when Berkey got engaged. So
yeah, Berkey got engaged. Timo got married. I was looking at RSL, and RSL's only played 2 games in the month of June because they played on March 31st, and then because they had this thing recently where they're like, we went undefeated in the month of June. For RSL, that's a big deal because they're 13th and they're having a terrible season. But I had to check myself on that because they won a game and then they lost, but then they had that big break that we had the week and a half, and their third most recent game was on May 31st. It's just bizarre. It feels like a weird time.
Yeah, and it's going to be a kind of an odd back half of the season for MLS teams with Club World Cup going on. I mean, obviously it only impacts a few of them, but looking at the Eastern Conference is going to be bizarre, standings table-wise for a while, with Inter Miami on 16 matches right now and the rest of the clubs on 20.
True story.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting.
It will definitely be interesting. You ready to go with the pod recording? You want to get going with this? We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, let's do this.
All right, so I'm going to bring us in. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holker. And this week, we are live on the big 550 KTRS as we record this on Thursday night, getting you ready for the weekend ahead of Major League Soccer action with St. Louis City facing Real Salt Lake, traveling to, is it still called Rio Tinto, or have they renamed that America First Stadium?
Oh, no, I still remember it as Zion Bank. So
they've got lots of names out there, but we're getting you ready for no matter where the name of the stadium is. They're playing in Utah, and we're getting you ready for that. So Stu, how you doing? And we've got a busy show ahead. What's on your mind as you're heading into this weekend?
Oh man, it's we were talking a little bit before we went and recorded live. Just it's kind of an odd shift around the team right now with the international break that just happened. U.S. hosting Guatemala in the Gold Cup semifinals. That was last night. It'll be a few nights in the past if you're listening on the radio. On my mind right now, if you can't tell, if you're listening on the radio and don't have visual confirmation, I'm thinking about Selmer Pedro, our first ever St. Louis City SC signing, who has gone on a loan back to Velez Mostar, and that will effectively run out his contract. So it's kind of an end of an era.
That's true. So let's get right into it because we've got a jam-packed show that includes the transfer window news. It includes the preview. And so let's kick it off with the outgoing news. Selmer Pedro, the first ever official signing to St. Louis City SC back in the beginning of 2022, has been loaned back out to Bosnian Premier League side FK Velez Mostar. The loan runs through the end of December 2025, which coincides with the conclusion of Pedro's contract with St. Louis City SC, all of which they were very upfront about. They're very open about in their press release and in their article on this. This is the end of Pedro's era with St. Louis City. He made 24 appearances for the organization between the MLS first team and the next Pro City 2 side, contributing 1 goal and 2 assists while as the club put out, helping City 2's late season playoff push in 2023. And not to belabor the point, but if you have to tout how he helped City 2's late season playoff push in the first season that he was supposed to be playing in MLS, I think that tells you a lot of what you need to know about Selmer Pedro's contribution to this club over his tenure.
Yeah, very, very disappointing. I would say he came in with a lot of hype. Obviously, he's Bosnian and a huge amount of Bosnian influence in St. Louis and St. Louis soccer. He did have an incredible golazo against Chicago Fire 2 in that 2023 season. So if you want to watch city highlights of Selmer Pedro, I think you can just loop that one over and over again.
The probably one and only. It was a good one, but probably the one and only. And honestly, looking at what we're doing in the transfer window right now, we're going to give you a little tease here on the Big 550 KTRS, and join us on our podcast for the wind down, where we're going to go a little bit more in depth into these players and what they mean for the club overall. The transfer window opens on July 24th, and Pedro's loan ended on June 30th. So this is just bookkeeping to get him out. As we're continuing to send out Pedro, not bringing him back in for left back services, City has reportedly shown interest in a slew of left-footed defenders. So stay tuned for our wind down to hear a deeper dive into some of these players, but more so what they mean for the club as a whole. We're going to run through some of those rumors right now to get you caught up to what City appears to be in the market for in this transfer window that opens on July 24th. So the next few weeks, we're probably going to get some more rumors hits, more reports. Don't forget what I always say about these rumors and reports is if you hear it from a news organization or it is reported somewhere, I would say other than Tom Bogert with MLS, and I'll get to why in a minute, but if you hear it from anybody, think through why that news is being leaked. Is there a dollar sign? Is there a euro sign that's attached to that? And is it intended, is it maybe put out there by an agent? Is it put out there by the player, by the coach, by a family member? Something to, or on both sides, the club that's interested, the club that's selling. Everybody has a vested stake when they start to leak information. There's a reason things come out the way and when they do. And that's no different from a lot of these folks, except I would say for the aforementioned Tommy Scoops. Tom Bogert, the reason he's so trusted is he has sources at the league office. He knows when paperwork is filed, when questions are asked. And so when he reports that an offer has been made on an international player, it's because the league has vetted that international player and an approved offer has gone out to that club. And that does appear to be the case for one of these players. So let's run through them really quick on who they are and what we know about them. The first one that came out was Michael Gergel, a 19-year-old left-footed left back who could be on a U22 deal and require a transfer fee. He's Polish, playing in the Polish first tier Ekstraklasa League with Lech Poznan. His market value on Transfermarkt is 3.5 million euros, with his contract expiring in 2028. So he would require a transfer fee. It does seem like he's a valuable commodity as a left-footed left back, Michael Gergel. The next one is Vojan Saraphimovic, a 19-year-old Serbian youth international, plays for FK Kukariki, a left-footed center back who's under contract until June 28 with his current club. He could qualify for a U22 slot based on his value of 600,000, his market value anyway on Transfermarkt, and he would require a transfer fee to bring over. He's currently playing in the Serbian first-tier league, Superliga Srbije, for Kukariki. The third one that came out this week is Teodoro Sebastian Ars, a 25-year-old right-footed Paraguayan winger, currently plays for Club General Caballero in Paraguay. Ars has 18 goals and 7 assists in 105 appearances, with 10 goals in his last 36, primarily as a left winger, but is experienced in all the attacking roles. And the question here would be, is he interested for City or for City 2? Because the market value on this guy on Transfermarkt is 300,000 with an unknown transfer fee needed because his contract isn't publicly disclosed. We don't know if it's ending this June or if it ended rather this June and he's a free agent, or if we'd have to pay a transfer fee to get him. And the last name that came out is Falou Fall, a 21-year-old left-footed center back, Senegalese U23, currently plays in Norway's first division for Fredrikstad and has a 2.8 million euro market value, with the contract expiring as of a couple of days ago. So he could be on his way to City on a free if we were to extend an offer. Stu, we've got left-footed defenders all over the place. We've got a left winger potentially who could play multiple forward positions, which sounds a little like Jean de Silva, to be honest. So what do you make of all these players? And knowing that we'll go into them all during the wind down, does anybody stand out here, or what stands out to you?
Oh, yeah. What stands out to me is just, it's transfer season. It's silly season. We're going to get a lot of rumors. Remember, not all of them are going to be hits. Some agents are just throwing out names. Like you said, you got to vet these rumors at the beginning. Falou Fall is the most intriguing, I think, just because he seems to be the one that's, we'll get into it later, but maybe farthest along. But man, the City 2 possibilities and with Teodoro is really interesting to me. I remember a couple years ago, we had a guy, Stanislav Koval, signed for City 2, but initially he got attached to St. Louis City as a possible U22. So there were just rumors flying around, and eventually he got, I think those rumors, the sources in other countries don't quite differentiate between the reserve and senior team very well.
Very true. And Yaziel Orozco is a good example for that, where the first time he had rumors break, it was for City as an organization, and he ended up being signed to City too. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind. And circling back to what I said about, and what you alluded to, Stu, the rumors and how and why and when they get leaked out. Vojan Saraphimovic, the 19-year-old Serbian youth international, is the one that Tom Bogert reported that City have bid on him. And so that would seem to be more concrete than the others, where there is either interest, there is communication, there are discussions underway. But Vojan Saraphimovic, the 19-year-old Serbian youth international, left-footed center back, that's the one that Tom Bogert reported we have bid on. So that could be a name to remember, Saraphimovic, to see if that. Any other thing to note before we move into our RSL preview with the transfer targets, or anybody else that you've seen, Stu?
Not really. It's just also an interesting time to see what other clubs are doing around the league. And I don't think we've had any super massive transfers break so far this window, but you can correct me on that. But just keep your eyes open and see who else is moving around.
Yeah, Tom Bogert, who breaks a lot of these news, like we said. I would say Timo Werner from RB Leipzig is probably the biggest name that's been tossed around, going to potentially New York Red Bulls. Some other names that we really haven't known too much about, but could make a splash. Colorado's also in the market for a center back, reportedly. It's silly season, so there's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of news. And like I said, July 24th is when the transfer window actually opens. That are a little hard to believe. Like a $4 million transfer fee for Falou Fall was reported, or at least his value and the discussions being in the $4 million range. These seem, now compare that to Jake Girdwood-Reich, who was brought in for about $800,000 last season, U22 center back. So $4 million transfer fee for a U22, especially a center back, would be a paradigm shift. Absolutely. Could not agree more with Byron Tim in the chat. So let's pivot a little to talk about RSL. And don't forget, if you're listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, tune into the podcast for a wind down where we will go a little more in depth into these players. But for now, let's turn our focus to Real Salt Lake against St. Louis City. And this is the fifth meeting between these two clubs, the first meeting of 2025. Believe it or not, these two teams haven't met in over a year. City is 1-2-1. That's 1 win, 2 losses, and 1 draw against RSL. The last time they played was over a year ago. In February and March of 24, they wrapped up their season series. City hasn't won against RSL since their first meeting on March 25th, 2023, and has a 7 goals scored, 7 goals against history record against them. Their 1 win, of course, being on the road to start off their season, or their series in general. But these two teams are not really familiar with each other. I will say that. A lot of things, obviously, from St. Louis City's side has changed since the last time these two teams met. And so this is a refreshing match. It's not any kind of familiarity, I would say, going on, especially between coaches. I mean, we've gone through 2 head coaches since then, 3 head coaches since then. Last time we played at RSL, Bradley Carnell was the head coach. We've cycled through Hackworth, Melberg, and now Critchley. Let's look at RSL, though, and how they come into this match. They come into this match 13th in the West, just 1 position above St. Louis City. They have a 5-10-4 record on 19 points in 19 matches. 19 goals scored, 26 goals against, and a -7 goal differential. Their home record is 3-4-1. Their last 3 matches, And we were talking before we went on air that they've only played twice in the month of June because of that extended break. And the last time they played in May was May 31st. And so this is a team that hasn't exactly played a lot of matches. And as we're going to talk about in a moment, they are missing their massive firepower. Their last three, a 1-1 draw away to Sporting KC on June 28th. They had a 2-0 win at home against DC United, and then a 2-0 loss away to the LA Galaxy before that in May. And that was the LA Galaxy's first win. We know how terrible the Galaxy have been in their struggles, and this RSL team is who the Galaxy beat 2-0. Some of the trends for the RSL side that we're going to be playing is that the Galaxy loss that 3 matches ago was their 7th winless match in a row. So they went through a pretty dark stretch here in the beginning third of the season or so. They have yet to put up back-to-back wins. Now, their last match was a draw. Their goals scored and goals against at home is 9 goals scored, 8 goals against. It's marginally better on the road, but 9 goals scored, 8 goals against in 8 matches is nothing to write home about. They've played 2 games so far without Diego Luna this month, and they're 1 win and 1 draw in those 2 games. So surprisingly, they haven't been stuck in the mud without Diego Luna. That's going to be something noteworthy to keep in mind. RSL in this entire season so far in their 19 games only have 6 second half goals. So if you think about all the struggles that St. Louis City has had in allowing goals late in games, this could be a tasty little matchup here because of RSL's struggling to score goals in the second half. And then in general, this RSL side, 9 wins in their last 36 matches. We know that St. Louis City's been struggling, but putting it into perspective too, we're not the only team that's been struggling. This is one of the all-time struggles for RSL. It's borderline their worst or second worst start in the history of their organization. And so they're coming into this match not totally healthy, but also they're not really desperately dealing with injuries compared to what St. Louis City is at their top elite levels. There's one player, and I mentioned him a moment ago. So let's run through last week's health and availability for RSL, maybe some names you might know. Matthew Bell was out with a hamstring injury. He was a backup left winger and former 2024 first-round super draft pick. Javian Brown out with a knee injury last week. He's a starter on their back line, but has been hurt most of this year. Emeka Eneli out with a foot injury. He was and is their starter at central defensive midfield when he's healthy. Their starting goalkeeper, Zach McMath, is out with a shoulder injury, and he's been out all year. Rafael Cabral has played all 19 matches and has 4 clean sheets for RSL so far. They have been without Tyler Wolff. He had a knee injury. He's a backup attacker, usually at left wing. So not a lot of starting injuries. They've got Anelli and Brown, I would say, that the biggest losses as far as injuries go. But the story for RSL in this game, the absolute biggest story, potentially the only story that anybody really cares about, is this RSL side is without Diego Luna. Diego Luna of U.S. men's national team fame. If you're a national team fan or even just watched this match that was at Energizer Park this week, you saw why Diego Luna is so valuable to Real Salt Lake. Not just 2 goals against the men's national team. It wasn't a flash in the pan. This season, Diego Luna has scored 8 of their 18 goals scored that can be attributed to one of their players. They had an own goal, 19 total, 18 goals scored by their players, and Luna accounts for 8 of those. The next highest players are Xavier Gozo and Johnny Russell. Remember that name, Johnny Russell? Both of them have 2 goals. So this is a massive loss when it comes to their goal-scoring prowess to not have Diego Luna available because he's going to be playing for the U.S. men's national team this weekend against Mexico for a Gold Cup title. Now, David Critchley said it pretty well in the pregame comments on Diego Luna and RSL without him. We all saw what Luna can bring yesterday, talking about Wednesday. He'll be missed for RSL, but that's good news for us. He talked about what their type of style of play are that we'll get to in a little bit, but he's acknowledging, he knows like everybody else knows, Diego Luna is the X factor for this RSL side. So Stu, is this a trap kind of a situation where RSL has won 1 and drawn 1 without Luna? So we know the explosiveness, we know the presence that he has on the field, how their offense flows through him. 8 goals in general leads their team, would lead our team. But are we overlooking the rest of this RSL side? And is not to limit or mitigate Diego Luna's importance, but there are clearly other goal scorers and other threats that RSL has.
Yeah, I think the one that RSL fans are really expecting to step up is Xavier Gozo. He's a 18-year-old RSL homegrown. He looked pretty electric by all accounts from their fans against Sporting Kansas. So I think he's one to keep an eye on. And also, of course, Johnny Russell. one of those guys that we love to hate. Sporting KC, Sporting Kansas captain, left as a free agent in the offseason and signed with RSL. He actually scored against Kansas, and he was the that goal in the draw for them. So yeah, and very classy on how he didn't actually celebrate in front of Kansas fans. He very respectfully, walked away, clapped, and that's a thing in soccer if you're not aware. So kudos to him for that. Still don't like him. So yeah, he always really plays well against City. So he's just my personal boogeyman for this match.
And they also have Willie Agata, former SKC player, a name that a lot of people might be familiar with, who plays for RSL now. They've got some mainstays on their team, like Pablo Ruiz in the midfield. So some of this RSL team is familiar, but in different ways, from Russell and Agata to Pablo Ruiz. But I think the thing that we're grateful for is that Diego Luna is not going to be playing. We'd rather cheer him on in the Stars and Stripes. Now, looking at St. Louis City coming in, guys, we know the struggles. 14th in the West, 3-11-6 record, so even worse than Real Salt Lake. 15 points in 20 matches, 19 goals scored in those 20 matches, 31 goals allowed in those 20 matches, minus 12 goal differential, and we are 1-7-2 away. So this is a team that continues to struggle to win away. And the record is starting to slip and fall downhill under David Critchley. 1-3-1, with the last few matches being that loss to Houston last weekend, 1-0, a 4-2 loss at home to Orlando midweek prior. Before the break, before that, we had a 3-3 draw to the LA Galaxy. And some of the trends, it's an up and down side. It's a side struggling to find balance, and that's one of the big stories here. We have 4 of our 7 highest expected goal matches have been under Critchley in those first 4 of his 5 total, but his 5th match coach was our 2nd worst offensive performance of the entire season. And defensively, 4 of Critchley's 5 matches have allowed 1.7 XG or higher. 3 of them have allowed 2.2 XG or higher. That's very bad. Teams often outperform their XG, and that's how they win matches. So if you're allowing 2.2 XG in 3 of your matches, really bad sign for your defense. These account for 4 of our 8 worst expected goals allowed of the year. So if you think about how bad the defense had gotten under Olaf Melberg, how great it started, how bad it got there in the middle, where we were allowing 3+ expected goals allowed in multiple games, Critchley's teams have to shore up the defense. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can say the offense is struggling, but I prefer to look right now as the offense had an aberration of a game this past weekend, and one game does not make a trend to me, where the 4 games before that started to make a trend. This was a road bump offensively, but we got to right this ship defensively. It has to start to be a trend from last week, and you have to find that balance. So that'll be a storyline that I pick up in just a minute. But, Stu, the storyline for St. Louis City is the absolute ravaging of injuries that this team is sustaining. I cheekily referred to this as a MASH unit as opposed to a soccer team at this point, because my goodness, this is we thought it was getting out of hand earlier this season. I'm at a loss for words in how to describe what's happening, but I'm going to do my best here. Now, we know from David Critchley's comments pre-game in his press conference, the following players are going to be out: Timo Baumgartel, Henry Kessler, Joachim Nilsson, Rasmus Alm, Edu Leuven, and Alfredo Morales. That's 6 players guaranteed to be out. 2 of them make up 2 of our best 3, arguably midfield spots in Leuven and Morales. Our 3 best center backs are out, and Rasmus Alm continues to be a mystery. So what's going on with these players in particular? Well, Timo Baumgartel's knee was hurt during the LA Galaxy match. Critchley said they're targeting the FC Dallas game on July 19th for his return, and that's 2 weeks after RSL. So we're going to be without Baumgartel for a little while longer. I think we've got RSL, Portland, and then maybe FC Dallas if his target holds. Alfredo Morales, he went down with a really bad looking injury this past week against Houston, tried to play through it. David Critchley was talking about the adrenaline flowing being the reason why he tried to play through it and just couldn't. Well, it turns out Alfredo Morales has a fracture in his clavicle. The x-rays, the imaging scans were performed on Tuesday, and turns out he will be out for multiple weeks. Edu Leuven trained on Thursday for the first time this week, but Critchley ruled him out for the weekend. Henry Kessler continues to recover from his hamstring injury, and David Critchley referred to Rasmus Alm and Joachim Nilsson as being, quote, out for the foreseeable future. That's all we can say on that. And it does lead directly into the conversation about Alm and Nilsson's future with the club. Alm's contract is up this year. Nilsson's contract goes through 2026. But circling back to this weekend, there are 2 players that will likely be listed as questionable. So we have those 6 players out. Chris Durkin and Michael Wenzel are probably going to end up with questionable designations. Durkin with a knee injury, Wenzel with a hamstring. Durkin, we kind of knew. Durkin was labeled day-to-day on Thursday by David Critchley after training earlier in the week and then getting a rest day on Thursday, so he wasn't out there with the team as the team continues to monitor him, call him day-to-day. Michael Wenzel, this was kind of a shock to us. Michael Wenzel had an MRI on his hamstring that came back clear, but they're being cautious with him as they might have an inclination. They pushed him a little too hard last week compared to his load so far this season, or at least they don't want to continue pushing him too hard and ramping him up too fast, too soon. And so whether it was something he felt or why the MRI was initially needed, it was performed and it came back clear. That's good news. Other injuries to be aware of, other players we've been monitoring over the past week include Conrad Wallem. David Critchley said, I think he said this after the press conference when we were asking him because we didn't mention him, but he wasn't a full participant at training all week. Critchley said they want to get him minutes, but how much and whether he's a candidate to start are the real questions. Getting him minutes could indicate 45. It could indicate 20. We'll have to see what that means for Conrad Wallem. So if you're projecting a lineup, Conrad Wallem is going to be a 50-50 shot to start, in my opinion. Now, details on that injury have been written by Tom Timmerman with the Post-Dispatch. Wallem originally injured his calf while training with City 2 after he got a red card in Critchley's first game and a 1-game suspension. Since then, he's come on as a second-half sub twice and started the most recent game, but came out at halftime. This was prior to Houston. So what Wallem said in that article is, quote, "It's been restricted every week in training and games for a month. On the weekend now, for example, I feel it's starting to tighten up a little bit after 30, 40 minutes. So it's not ideal, but hopefully we're working on it, and hopefully it's something better day by day and week by week." Now, the article goes on to say that Wallem is kicking himself about how he hurt it. Now, City 2 trains on the club's artificial turf field, Field 3, just to the south of those 2 grass training fields. And Wallem says he thinks he made his sore calf hurt even more training on that. Quote, "That was frustrating to say the least. Should have handled a little bit different, but it's how it is. I should have said that maybe I shouldn't have trained that day. I take responsibility for that for sure. Should have been clear on what my body needs and what it doesn't need. Hopefully we get control on it so I can start playing 90 minutes again." That's Conrad Wallem. The last player of note is Tomas Ostrak. Tomas Ostrak's been a little bit of an enigma for St. Louis over the past handful of weeks, and we have an answer now, courtesy of Tom Timmerman in the Post-Dispatch. We found out through that article that Tomas Ostrak has been dealing with fluid buildup in his leg connected to his season-ending injury last season. Now, the good news is, during the team's off week, he had the fluid drained, and Ostrak now says he's, quote, 100% again. From Tomas Ostrak, quote, "I was 2 months ago dealing with some adductor issues. I had fluid inside, inflammation, and it was uncomfortable. But still, I could play with that. I was waiting for the break for them to take it out, and I feel great again, and I'm good to go. I'm going to push and help the team as much as possible." And full credit for Tom Timmerman's article, because that's golden news that really goes in depth on what's been going on with Tomas Ostrak. Why did he end up back on the injury report? What's been going on that's causing him to not take a continued step up and recovering from his injury like Salio has been in recovering from his. So, Stu, I want to bring you back in. Injuries are obviously the biggest storyline here, but there may be a silver lining as far as the argument and the desire to see some of the young kids play because of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's been quite a few calls out there for seeing what City 2 has available, and if any of those players are willing to step up. And as you said online, there are some who have been training this week, and throughout the season they train. And do you want to get further into some of those who might participate in the match?
Please do. Yeah, please do.
All right. So Critchley said today that there's an opportunity for Tyson Pierce, homegrown, Seth Antwi, JZL Orozco, and Gabby McKenna, who's the City 2 captain, and they joined City in training this week. Orozco's an interesting one because he's a center defensive mid, center back, who came from RSL system, and he's a Real Monarchs player, alumni, their MLS Next Pro team. In 2021, he earned a homegrown contract and debuted in 2022 for RSL at 18 years old. That year, he made 3 starts and 4 appearances for RSL. So he's one to maybe keep your eye on. You mentioned Wallum. So if Wallum doesn't play, maybe Orozco finds his way in the lineup if JGR slots into Wallum's spot, something like that. So very interesting. We'll be able to see some new faces, hopefully a little bit of hope that'll light a pilot light back in some of the flagging hearts of the fans this weekend.
Yeah, the interesting thing is on the play the kids front, the ages of some of these guys. Like you said, Tyson Pierce is 17, JCL Orozco is 21. Those are the 2 youngest guys of the City 2 players who were training with the team this week. And it's fascinating because this is the first time I think we've seen a focus on the midfield and back line, bringing some folks up from City 2. Seth Antwi's 25 years old. He joined Tyson Pierce earlier in the week in training. Gabby McKenna is 24. So it's not massively young. It's not youth here, but keep in mind that John Hackworth is the current coach of City 2. So there's obviously close conversations going on between Hackworth and Critchley. Who's ready? What do they need? Priorities for City. And so I don't know if, and we'll talk about our starting 11s here later on, but I don't know if I'm to the point where I'm saying, all right, Pierce and Antwi, for instance, have been training all week. Might as well give them a starting slot. I'm not quite sure I'm there yet because the other big storyline for City isn't just the injuries. It's finding that balance. And so you need some cohesiveness, and you want to have continuity as much as possible to find this balance. Under Critchley, they've had a better offense the first 4 games. I mentioned I hope that this last game against Houston was an aberration on the offensive front, but it's almost the opposite where you're terrible defensively, you have a good defensive game, vice versa for the offense. You have got to start finding a balance here. And we'll talk through some of Critchley's comments on his search for that balance here in a little bit, but that is something that is absolutely vital to monitor. Any other big storylines you're thinking for City, or do you want to dive into some of the tail of the tapes on these 2 sides?
Well, to further the point of finding a balance, obviously City 2, the senior roster, senior team is your number 1, but we also don't want to be taking away too many of these City 2 players away from a City 2 side that is top of the Western Conference table in MLS Next Pro, where they are playing for, meaningful minutes, meaningful matches from here on out. So that's a little bit of valuable experience for them. Some of those guys, I believe Tyson Pierce and Seth Antwi have trained before prior weeks with City 2 throughout the season. Cam Silly as well, who didn't train this week. But, we see these guys move up and down kind of as a reward for how they've been playing. So, no, just finding the balance both for, City 1 and for City 2.
Yeah, and on that note, specifically Seth Antwi, this was his first week training with City. Critchley made sure to call that out on Tuesday, whereas Tyson Pierce did train in preseason. Orozco obviously has had 1 short-term loan so far. So they're getting some of these players back into the system. They're bringing in some guys who, I'm not sure if McKenna has trained before with City, but I know Antwi is his first kind of reward this week. So there's a lot of risk to bring these players up as well when you're needing to shore up your second half defense, especially. That'll be an interesting storyline to follow to see how many of these guys actually make the game day roster. Because in my starting 11 later on, spoiler alert, I will toss out the volume of players we have healthy in addition to how many of these guys may slot in. But before we get to that, you are listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, and we're about to dive into our tail of the tape, looking at some strengths and weaknesses of both of these sides, as well as some of the stats you need to know and what makes up both of these teams. Now, Real Salt Lake and St. Louis City are admittedly 13th and 14th in the Western Conference. This is not going to be a matchup at the top of MLS 360 that keeps coming back, but because we love St. Louis City, this is our matchup. Now, Real Salt Lake without Diego Luna, I don't know if they have very many strengths to discuss. They take long shots. They're very aggressive. David Critchley talked about their pressing prowess. They play in their own half a lot, and opponents do play aggressively against them. They aren't great at finishing scoring opportunities. Their shots on target percentage, as I'll mention, is pretty poor. They're pretty poor at aerial duels. They're defending counterattacks. They're pretty weak in that. And they're not great at protecting leads. They have given up a majority of their losses have come because they've given up winning positions. That lack of goal scoring in the second half has directly led to losing points from winning positions. And so that's something that St. Louis can very much take advantage of. We know the issues that St. Louis has had. We don't need to mitigate. We don't need to litigate all of those things. We know St. Louis likes to attack down the left. They like to use long balls. They will attempt crosses a lot, especially this season. They will take a lot of shots, but they've been forced almost to play in their own half a lot. So that's been something Critchley is trying to work on, is the field tilt battle, getting the ball into the attacking third and keeping the ball there more often than not necessarily passing the ball around horizontally, but having multiple possessions where you're getting the ball quickly into the final third and you're just spending more time there. That's something St. Louis is consistently working on. Now, as far as shooting goes, this Real Salt Lake team is the 6th worst in Major League Soccer in non-penalty expected goals over the season, 22.1 in 19 games. That's just over 1 non-penalty expected goal per game. City is not much better, 24.5 over 20 games. That's averaging out to City with a 1.23 versus 1.16 advantage in non-penalty expected goals per 90. So slim margin here, but you can give the advantage to City, at least on paper. Both teams, though, underperforming goals scored versus expected goals, with being the 5th, 2 of the bottom 5 teams in Major League Soccer as far as their non-penalty goals minus XG. And this is the stat that looks to how do the underlying metrics of XG match up to your actual goals scored? Because everybody always points to stats being stats, but goals scored is what matters. Well, City, even with poor XG, Real Salt Lake, even with poor XG, both of them are vastly underperforming that in their actual goals scored. Both teams are also in the bottom 6 in Major League Soccer in shots on target percentage. RSL is actually 9th in Major League Soccer in shots per 90, whereas St. Louis is 18th, but consistent quality is pretty poor from both sides on this. Now, I'm probably doing a pretty bad job in hyping this game up if I'm saying how bad they are in shooting, but these tend to be some of the more fun matchups where both teams come into this struggling to find consistency in their shots. And so it opens up the game. At the very least, these games tend to be more entertaining because teams will take opportunities, take chances, take shots, and they'll entertain in the style of play. Even if you're not converting these, the volume is there from both teams, and that's at least an entertaining match. Now, field tilt, coming back to field tilt. This is determined by passes into and within the final third. So how much time, like I said, is spent in your opposing team's final third. In the last 5 matches, RSL has had, and this is a percentage base, so you have percentages of field tilts. RSL has had 40%, 51 in both those games without Diego Luna, 55, 45, 41. So they're not getting walked off the field as far as being dominated in their defensive third. They're middling around that 40 to 50 to 55%. So pretty even as far as RSL's games recently is in field tilt. St. Louis, though, St. Louis is continuing to struggle with their field tilt, and the quality getting the ball out of their defensive half continues to elude them in a lot of ways. The last 5 for St. Louis on field tilt is 32%, 43, 53, 25, and 39. David Critchley's side has got to improve their ability to get the ball into the attacking third with more regularity. If they can't continue to do this, they're not going to be able to win this game. That number has to be some kind of a dogfight in the 40 to 60% range if he really wants to have not just a chance for 3 points, but to show that they're the better team in this matchup. Because possession-wise, possession sometimes translates to in people's minds on field tilt, whereas RSL averages 52.1%, St. Louis averages 44.9%, 11th and 27th respectively. But possession doesn't inherently equal winning the field tilt battle, as St. Louis has shown so often, where passes in the defensive half, passes backwards, not progressive passes, that all exists in boatloads for St. Louis at times, but we're not winning the field tilt battle. And in a lot of cases, because that's happening, we're shooting ourselves in the foot on the field tilt battle. We're losing it because of our inability to get the ball into the final third. So with all that said, I have a few questions that I want to finish this up on before we get into our starting 11s that I think really hammer home the importance of different aspects of this game. 3 questions, and I want you to go into it a little bit, Stu, on what you think about the first one. But the 3 questions are, can City play aggressive enough to beat the RSL press? Can City progress the ball better than they did against Houston with the lineup that they're probably going to have available similar to Houston? And honestly, specifically, can Simon Betcher specifically get open in behind the lines? So I want to circle back to the beginning and get your thoughts, because the question of can City play aggressively enough to beat the RSL press, it comes directly from David Critchley, who said in his pregame comments, RSL, they're a team that presses really aggressively. They're good when they press high up the field. When we can bypass their pressure, we feel like we can have a lot of opportunity to create chances, box entries, and goal-scoring chances. We just have to be good at playing forward aggressively, and that for us was an emphasis in training this week. We've gone in, and we've tried to help this group with the ball and to create chances, but we're playing at times too safe. I want them to be a little braver in playing forward and breaking the lines. And if we can do that against RSL, we think it'll be a good game plan because their front five are aggressive in pressing, but their back five, we think we can have success against. So what is your confidence level, Stu, in City's ability to beat the RSL press, no matter how that looks on the field?
It's a lot more confident than I was before listening to that quote from Critchley. I mean, images are dancing through my head of, Klaus getting behind and just an amazing finish, or Betcher feeding Klaus, or Totland going down to the byline, crossing it into, Hartle heading it in. No, this sounds like we have a good game plan going up against their press. And I'm excited. Like you said, these games, even though these teams on paper are not the sexiest two teams going up against each other, it does seem on paper like this should be an exciting matchup for the reasons you gave.
So the second question, can City progress the ball better than they did versus Houston with the lineup they're going to have available? And this goes directly to our injuries and our issues that we're going to have in putting together a roster. So Critchley's comments to this question, quote, it's going to be trying to provide as many options off the ball as well to the center backs. In this game model, Critchley says, I ask 15-yard progressive passes from the center backs. I do fully believe even those guys, the guys he has available now, like a JGR and a Wenzel, can execute those actions. The game against Houston was a situation you can look at. Our progression wasn't too good. You can give credit to Houston, but for me, it was the bravery that we need more of from our guys to break the line centrally, and the movement off the ball might need to be very good in front of them to give them more clear passing options and passing lanes and give them 2 or 3 different objectives. If we can't play right through them, here's what the options should look like to play around them. Give them options. He said they gave them options midweek, and he set them up for success. So this goes back to points that Santi and I made on Fallout, where JGR and Michael Wenzel, great job defensively, great defensive performances, but this City progression, the City ball movement begins with Roman Berkey and our center backs. The in possession coming from a goal kick, you have the 2 wide center backs, everybody else pushes forward and wide. And if you're going to have success overall and consistently, this has to be a big piece of it. When Berkey dumps the ball off to the center backs, or when the center backs find the ball, they have to have open lanes, they have to have options, and they have to be able to get the ball up into those 15-yard progressive passes. This isn't just on JGR, Michael Wenzel, Yaziel Orozco, or Gabby McKenna, whoever it ends up being, Kyle Hebert, Josh Yarrow. Yeah, they're still on our team. It's not just on those guys, but it's on players like Conrad Wallem, Tomas Ostrak, Thomas Totland, Jay Reed, all of the players on that middle line right in front of them that need to provide some kind of a medium to long-term outlet. And that hasn't been there either. The creativity off the ball has continued to frustrate us. So do we think that any one of these pieces has the opportunity or has the opportunity to really improve against RSL?
Man, that honestly, I don't know. My gut says if you're putting young players, if you have a guy like Orozco going into his first start with City, you don't expect that level of bravery. I don't know. Maybe Critchley, who's very familiar with him at City too, would be able to entice that out of him. As far as players on the back line who provide progression, I mean, if we're starting, I hate to say, Hebert, Yarrow, and Watts, we're not getting a whole lot of progression out of those 3. So to be blunt, if it really depends on what our starting 11 is, and that will determine how optimistic I am if we can progress. If we have all 3 of those out there, all 3 of those guys out there, I'm not super confident. But if we have a mix of them, then I'm a little more confident.
I think that's where I am too, is when you see the starting 11 on Saturday night, that's going to give you your comfortability factor in how well we can progress the ball and what it's going to look like. Because if you see a Tomas Ostrak and a Conrad Wallem in the midfield, I have a little bit more confidence that those two can maneuver themselves. And we know their ball handling skills, 2 of the better players on our team in handling the ball. And so it gives me a little more confidence in how they can help the center backs in that deeper central midfield spot. But yeah, if you have something like, honestly, if you have a Keel Watts in there with Conrad Wallem, I don't know, because I've seen it not work. That's the thing. I haven't seen Ostrak and Wallem a lot together, but I've seen Watts. I've seen what he can offer in the central midfield lately, and it doesn't help progress the ball, especially if you have, like you said, inexperienced center backs or center backs who are a known quantity like a Hebert or Yarrow that just do not get the job done progressively passing. But defensively and on the defensive side in progression, that's not the only question. It's Simon Betcher as well. He's cemented himself as one of the starting 11, not just in a top striker role on the rest defense, but right midfield side that then moves up into a higher role in progression. So can Simon Betcher, if he's on the field specifically, get in open behind enemy lines? Because he mentioned this a couple times. Simon Betcher noted that this is what didn't work against Houston. He wasn't able to find space. He wasn't able to get in behind the lines. He wasn't able to beat the press and progressively receive those kinds of balls. I'm wondering how well Simon Betcher, and honestly, like, let's get into a little bit of starting 11 talk. Do you think Simon Betcher starts this game based on that frustration and struggle against Houston? Uh-oh, did I lose you, Stu?
Oh, sorry, I'm back. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, no, I think.
Okay, hey, let me lead you in real quick.
All right.
So let's look at the starting 11 a little bit, Stu. Do you think Simon Betcher, based on last week's performance, actually makes the starting 11, and does he find more success in getting in behind the lines?
Yeah, no, I think he starts. I really like that partnership between Betcher and Klaus. We know that they're close off the field, and they're close on the field. And if you say anything, run afoul of either of them, they'll let you know.
Yes, they will.
So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to. I really like Betcher. I'm, if there's one person left on this earth who likes Simon Betcher, I'll probably be that person. I just love watching him play at SLU and following him at Whitecaps. I know he has his weaknesses, but this does seem like a match that's good for him. If he's going to be running up against a guy like Justin Glad, I know he's a tall center back. I don't recall him being the paciest center back. I'm not entirely sure if that's incorrect or not. But that'll be an interesting matchup as he goes up against Glad. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm excited to see Betcher.
For Simon Betcher, it's not just what can he do to help the attack. He talked to us on Thursday, and one of the questions I asked him was about the push points, because we hear so often it's not just about progressing the ball up, but it's about taking defensive postures and creating quick turnovers and direct strikes. And so it all starts up top for St. Louis on that. So if St. Louis is ineffective in their own press, that's the reason why they're so easily sliced through, is if they're not working cohesively as a unit, it all falls apart. And so Simon Betcher told me on Thursday, he said regarding their pressing, quote, "We talk a lot about relationism and working in partnerships with the guys next to you. For me, it's having a good jump on triggers and being able to close down space as the ball travels. If you're late on that, or you get tactically pinned down a bit, you find yourself deeper. And against Houston, I found myself deeper. It's about being on the front foot, and if one guy is late or all of us aren't on the same page on those triggers, it can start to show defensively." And I think this is where a lot of people, this is the game inside the game. This is where you have to watch the off the ball movements. This is where you have to watch who is pressing where, when, and with who. Because it's not just on that first person that engages the ball. If Klaus engages on the ball, you should see at least 4 or 5 other players moving to cover certain areas, cutting off lanes, cutting off a back pass, for instance. Those are the kinds of things that Betcher's talking about here. And so that's going to be a key to the game as well. It's not just offensively progressing the ball, getting it behind the lines, but it's being more effective in City's own press. Whether they choose to do it in the middle of the field or in the attacking third, RSL's defensive third, doesn't matter. The fact that City's press needs to be more effective in this relationism that Betcher mentioned, that is a Critchley word, apparently, as I understand it. It needs to be reinforced, and those working in partnerships really need to be magnified. That needs to be a hallmark of St. Louis in their press, because it hasn't been working so far. If they could improve that, then the sky is the limit on what they can do in frustrating teams and creating turnovers, creating counterattacks, and at least putting themselves in better positions. So a lot of that relates to who is going to be on the field to do this, though, Stu. So let's finish off this show on KTRS with a predicted starting 11s and a predicted score. There's a lot of questions about should we just play the kids at this point? And I know Santiago Beltran, our beloved buddy, that's his mantra, play the kids. The season is lost in a lot of people's eyes, and so that is a valid point. It's a valid argument. So what does that mean? Tyson Pierce, Seth Antwi, Yaziel Orozco, Gabby McKenna. Talked about the ages of some of those players, and they're not exactly kids. But at the same time, Miggy Perez hasn't been in training this week. He's a homegrown off roster that would require or supplemental slot 31. He would require a short-term loan. He hasn't been in training. So playing the kids has kind of a limit to what we can do right now. I'll start us off with my projected 11, as well as who I think is going to be on our bench, and you let me know what you think. I've got obviously Roman Berkey in net. Backline of Jay Reed, Jake Girdwood-Reich, and Kyle Hebert with Thomas Totland on the right side. My midfield is Tomas Ostrak and Conrad Wallem. I have Salio, Marcel Hartl, Simon Betcher, and Klaus up top. Not a lot of changes, but the biggest question that I have is, will Ostrak and Wallem both start at the same time? Because I kind of think that a better approach, and one we may be more likely to see, is dropping Marcel Hartl deeper into the midfield. Either of Tomas Ostrak or Conrad Wallem starts. So knowing that Ostrak is still working himself back into fitness from that fluid being in his leg, fluid removal that he had done. Conrad Wallem still dealing with that calf injury on a minutes restriction. I don't know if both of them start, because I think both of them are going to be kind of working, subbing off for each other. That's a more likely approach to me. So you drop Marcel Hartl deep into the midfield, because you don't have anybody else. I don't see Tyson Pierce or Seth Antwi starting in this game. So if you do that, it just opens up Cedric Toyshirt. So it's Salio, Cedric, Simon, and Klaus. And I think that might be the more likely thing as I talk myself into it. But the bench, the reason I said the bench might be a good question is I'm going to count them for you. So count with me here. John De Silva, Cedric Toyshirt, Akil Watts, Joey Zielinski, Josh Yarrow, Ben Lund. So from my OG starting 11, where Ostrak and Wallem are both in there, you only have 6 players on the bench who are healthy and rostered for City. That opens up a spot for Tyson Pierce, Seth Antwi, and one of Yaziel Orozco or Gabby McKenna. So I do see a realistic scenario where you are going to see 2 or 3 short-term loans announced this weekend, and we could see Tyson Pierce appear on a game day roster for the first time in 2025. I think maybe the first time overall, because Tyson Pierce, I believe he wasn't a short-term loan. He was on a season-long loan last season. I don't believe he was actually short-term loaned back to the club. So we could be in for the first appearance for Tyson Pierce on City's roster. 17-year-old homegrown in his second season with City, perennial youth national team player. That's an exciting prospect for me. But what do you got?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, I don't think this is the match you see a guy like Tyson Pierce starting, but I think him on the bench makes sense. I have Berkey, Reed, and I think I'm going to deviate here a little bit. I'm not totally comfortable with Wallem starting.
Yep.
I think he'll come off the bench in this one. So I have Hebert, Totland, Ostrak, JGR, double pivot pairing, Celio, Hartl, Betcher, and Klaus. But I could go either way, but I'm a little nervous on how how cursed, for lack of a better word, our central midfield has been this season. So Ostrak and Wallem being out there at the same time, both with some injury concerns, does worry me a little bit.
Yeah, I'm backing off my original projection. I talked myself out of it. I don't want to see Ostrak and Wallem. I want to see one of those two. And I personally, I see Marcel Hartl dropping back with him, because I think JGR showed enough at center back that they would probably prefer to have him there versus a City 2 person. But yours could be very valid. He showed quality at central defensive midfield before. I think that's only a good thing that our other U22 JGR has to offer us right now. Isn't it bizarre, Stu, that we started this season with 6 center backs that we thought would be options, 6 for sure center backs, and 2 players that could play center back, meaning Joachim Nilsson, Henry Kessler, Timo Baumgartel, Kyle Hebert, Josh Yarrow, Michael Wenzel as our 6 center backs. And then you had Chris Durkin and JGR, midfielders who could play center back. And the best option possibly out of that entire group now is JGR.
It's incredible.
How
And
insane is
also
that?
Giannis Horn and Joey Zielinski. Joey Zielinski, we found out, played center back for a little bit at Rutgers in college. So,
Yep. Right center
yeah,
back.
no,
Yep.
incredible. I mean, JGR was touted
Madness.
as a center back originally when he came over, or that's where he played a lot in the A League, I believe.
Yes.
And then we saw him more as a center midfield when he came over here. But no, he's been impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you talk about it, I mean, he did impress and look great in that spot in the center back. It's just where where do you find the weakness of sliding a new player in that lineup? Where will they make the biggest impact, both positively and negatively?
That's true. And the good news is most of them have been training with City for this week. So, and you're spot on. Thanks for mentioning JGR's best position. As he says, it is the center back spot. He told me that again, reinforced it from what he told us last week. And if you haven't checked out my interview with JGR, it's on the Fly Over Footy podcast feed. So that is a great interview, pretty quick, 6 or 7 minutes with a lot of insight into JGR. But Stu, we got to get out of here on the Big 550 KTRS. So score predictions, because Vegas has RSL as a pretty heavy favorite on this one. Do you think we can pull it
Yeah,
out?
I'm going to go optimistic. I'll even go 3-2. RSL goes up 2 goals, and we come back with 3 unanswered.
Ooh, diving into the RSL not scoring in the second half and really believing in City's ability to come back. I had it at a 2-2 draw and thought that was optimistic. So it's another one of these matches where if you're ever going to have a playoff hope, RSL is one of those 3 teams, Houston, RSL, and Dallas, that's standing in your way. We have 2 matches left against RSL, 2 against Dallas, 1 against Houston, and we have to win basically all of those. The numbers are against us right now, but there's a lot of positivity still in this locker room on this team. Critchley has reinforced that the vibes are still high and everybody believes in what they're doing. This is going to be an interesting opportunity to not just go into altitude in Utah and face this RSL team down so many injured players. Opportunity for some of the younger guys, opportunity for people to cement themselves in some positions that they may not have been considered for before. There's a lot of opportunity, and that could be the key word that drives a lot of these City players. So a lot of positivity because of the opportunity going forward. Thank you for joining us on Fly Over Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker for Stuart Holtgren. We hope you enjoy the game and tune into our podcast for the rest of the wind down, and we will talk to you later. All right, Stu. I'm going to have to edit that one because that went longer than 45
Yeah, I got a lot
sure.
of dead air in there you can take out.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm going to go grab a drink and then we'll dive into our wind down transfer targets. And if you guys have any questions on transfers, how they fit into City, questions about our roster, what we have available to us, let us know and we'll cover it. We will be right back. Stu, the other thing about you not having a camera is I have no idea if you're back.
Yeah,
so you're going to have to tell me.
I'm just sitting here. I never left. I rotated slightly, but I have a corgi at my feet right now, so I can't really move. Started off fireworks season over here about 5 o'clock.
Oh, no.
So can't hear much at the moment outside, but I'm sure they're popping off now and then.
Oof. All right. Well, we've got a lot of info that has popped up on some of these transfer targets. So I'm pulling some of them up now, and then we'll dive into them. Because the thing that we're going to be talking about, guys, is it's not necessarily the specific players yet, because there's so many players on the big board that Lutz has and on that are being interested in conversations. So many feelers being put out. I think the types and profiles of some of these players is what is most important, even with some considerations on pricing and available roster slots and all of that good stuff. So let me look at, there we go. I've got Gurgle. Goodness gracious. Saraphimovic. Did you see this article on Saraphimovic, by the way?
No, I didn't. I poked around a little
My
bit at some things, but is that the Bogart?
My
the deep
gosh,
dive?
I might have to. It's a deep dive on him. I might have to share my screen and when we talk through this guy because, holy cow, there's a lot on this kid. 19-year-old. It kind of makes me want us to sign him just because of how much there is on him.
Oh man, it hurts just seeing that he's an 05. Oh, old as
it's brutal, isn't
old
it?
as dirt. Yeah.
Old as dirt. Okay. Almost ready, folks. All right, you ready to go back in, Stu?
Oh yeah.
All right. Welcome back to the wind down. Got a citywide light with the Pride can for this edition, even though Pride Month is over, but Pride never ends. And I'm excited to talk about some transfers, Stu. You excited to dive into the silly season a little bit in what we alluded to in the first part of the show?
Oh yeah. Let's start this.
All right. So St. Louis City has many more than four targets this transfer window. To level set what we have on our roster right now before we dive into each one of the players, we currently have one senior roster slot open out of 20, and that is even after the reloaning of Selmer Pedro. That didn't really move the needle to anything from earlier this season. We have one senior roster slot open, and that's the big money one. That's U22 slots have to fit into the senior roster. These are the ones that could be paid any amount of money up to the salary cap limit. On the supplemental roster slot right now, we actually have two roster slots open. The supplemental slot, because we have Miguel Perez, Mekhi Joyner, and Tyson Pierce all basically off roster right now, we have a couple spaces. And one of those spaces may be one of these players that we have rumored so far could fit into there depending on salary requirements. But the four players that we mentioned, Stu, they all profile somewhat similarly. Left-footed defenders seem to be a huge priority for St. Louis. Did any of these three, because we had three left-footed defenders here, Michael Gergel, Vojan Saraphimovic, and Falou Fall that we talked about earlier, do any of those three stand out more than any other? One of them does for me, but I'm curious on the limited that because first of all, we don't pretend to know everything about these players. We don't pretend that anybody in St. Louis knows a lot about these players. Any single deep dive that you see from anyone in St. Louis about any one of these players is based off of writings that other people have done or highlights that you've seen. And I hearken back, and this is my jadedness just a little bit, and having been with this team since the very beginning, is the left backs especially, the Selmer Pedros, the Nicholas Dewars, even Johnny Nelson. You could find extremely positive things about every single one of these players and be excited about things that they can bring to St. Louis. So I've seen it not work out. I've seen it work out in certain scenarios, like obviously Indiana Vasilev, Aziel Jackson, the younger kind of players that we've signed along the way. Sometimes they work out. Sometimes they hit huge roadblocks and they have to go to a different team. But that's why I personally am not overly fascinated by any individual player in what their promise is, what their possibilities are, styles of play, especially because, to be honest, if we're targeting the player, we expect them to fit into the style that we're trying to employ. And if they don't fit into the style, either we're not doing a good job scouting or they pull an Olaf Melberg and they tell us all the right things and they don't do what they came here to, what they said they could do. That said, I think we know that we're looking for ball handling center backs. We're looking for defenders who can play two-way soccer. You can defend, you can get involved in the attack, especially our fullbacks. Left-footed defender does seem to be a priority here, with 3 of these 4 being left-footed defenders, but also progressive passing. Your ability to control the ball, your ability to make decisions, your vision, All of those things are obvious assets to the system that we have that I would expect any of these players to be at least projected to excel in and shown glimpses at the youth level. So that said, Stu, for the three defenders, Michael Gergel, Vojan Saraphimovic, and Falou Fall, from what you've read, do any of them stand out more than any other?
Well, you mentioned left backs, and to me, the modern left back is one of the hardest positions to hit on, not just in MLS but in the world. And every window we seem to bring in a new left back or new candidates to progress and start. So Gergel is the most intriguing to me. I think a question with Jaden Reed is, do you pair him with a kind of a veteran left back, maybe an MLS veteran left back who can be a stalwart there? Or do you try to sign a guy like Gergel or another U22 player who can kind of grow and maybe you sell them at a profit at a later date? So he's the most intriguing just because I think he has the highest ceiling just from a positional standpoint. That said, I don't watch the Polish league very much outside of when Lech Poznan and Legia Warsaw play in the Champions League. So coming at this completely cold, but positionally, he's the one who intrigues me the most. But he also, with that price tag, I think, what was it, 4 to 5 million? Was that euro? I think he seems maybe the farthest least likely out of these ones.
Yeah, Gergel, I haven't been able to find too much about, but that market value on Transfermarkt being 3.5 million euros is fascinating, given what his career trajectory has been, and that has grown pretty exponentially in the past year or so, I would say. Before December 24, his market value was down at 1.5, and he saw a 2 million euro market value increase between September 24 and December 24. So whatever he showed in Poland, clearly enough to get a lot of people talking. And that could be what put him on the radar for Lutz. Any market value around that raises my eyebrow of feasibility for City because of what we've done before. The salary for Marcel Hartl being just north of 2 million, the transfer fee for JGR being the most recent high of 800,000 as a U22. Klaus and Leuven, their transfer fees years ago were in the 1.5 and $3.5 million range for Leuven and Klaus, respectively. They were a little more proven quantities, proven commodities in what they've done in their respective leagues, Belgium, Germany. So for a U22, I think this would be a trendsetter. This would be a paradigm shift, as Byron Tim said, because we have yet to see the U22 slot really taken advantage of for its fullest potential. You taking players like these caliber of players and be willing to spend multi-million dollar to transfer them in, to buy them out of their existing contract. And that's where I go to this next guy, Vojan Saraphimovic, the 19-year-old Serbian youth international, left-footed center back who's under contract as well until June 2028, just like Gergel. The Serbian first division, it's not outstanding, but it's not, it's noteworthy in its development capabilities. The market value of this player is $600,000, but I would say Saraphimovic has one of the more detailed deep dives that I have really ever seen. And so if you're on our live stream right now, I'm going to do my best to share my screen and kind of show what that actually looks like. There's a lot that they went into about, preferred foot left, transfer market value. His contract expires in 2028. But specific match infos and profiles that I'm going to skip a few areas and just dive into some of the takeaways. Key strengths for this player: aerial dominance, match reading, cool persona, so he stays cool under pressure. Strength, he's a physical presence. Risks to mitigate for this kind of player: he needs to evidence a wider passing range. So that whether that speaks to the progressive passing or the length of passing to skip lines or to look in more horizontal areas, he needs to be tested against superior opposition, which to me that to me tells me similar to a Mackay Joyner. He is excelling at his current level, and he needs to be challenged at a higher level. So he could be vulnerable to top-level pace. They have positioned him, Saraphimovic, at his current level recommendation being the bottom range of the championship in England, and the potential level being bottom range of a Premier League team. That's pretty high praise for this kind of a player. So Saraphimovic has mainly played on the left of the central defense, which is expected given he's left-footed. His heat map here that I'm showing really skews to the left. So if you're not seeing this, you're listening to us on the podcast. The heat map skews to the left, not quite deep into the wing area, but more the left channel in the defensive half. So he's clearly playing up to the half, the midline, higher up on the pitch for a center back, and he's getting the ball involved into the attacking half. I'm going to skip down on the visual down to this second report on him that looks at some of his other strengths in other matches. So match reading, again, is good. Smooth movement on and off the ball. His positioning is good, and scanning for danger. So match reading and scanning for danger tells me he has good vision. And that's necessary for our center backs to have, because you can already see what happens when that isn't a massive strength and you don't have players playing well off the ball in front of you. Is you're going to, if you don't see an obvious option and you don't have good vision, a good match reading, you're going to struggle to find opportunities to pass the ball. Risks in this other match for Saraphimovic needs to evidence a wider passing range. So he still obviously needs to improve in some of those critical passing numbers. Top level strength needs to be developed. And so looking at the ranges of the championship as the bottom range of the Premier League as a potential, he needs to increase his passing, improve his passing, but he also needs to get stronger to handle the physicality of those leagues. MLS is a physical league. I wouldn't put it in competition with the Premier League at all, but I would say that it has the opportunity to be compared to the championship as far as the physicality goes. So this is a pretty fascinating player, seeing these kinds of recommendations. And this is Vojan Saraphimovic, who is the one player that was reported by Tom Bogert as having an offer made for. That's why I hone in on Saraphimovic, and I spend time looking at this deep dive because unlike the other players, Gurgle and Fall, who all the reports have that we've just had conversations with teams. We've engaged there. We're asking about prices. Saraphimovic has gone through the league office. This is a pretty legit smoking gun, so to speak, as far as who we're looking to bring in. And if an offer has been made for an expiring contract with a $600,000 market value, I can see this being in the upper echelon of what JGR was offered. So that $800,000, you get into the $1 million range potentially for a transfer fee. And the salary is going to be what it is. Like these market values, they don't tell you what the weekly wages, what the yearly wages are going to be. That's not really how you read into these things because the wages never public, never negotiated, never public until like a players association puts them out there typically. But this wouldn't break the bank for me. You're not having a wild number like Gurgle's 3.5 million euros or Fall's 2.8 million euros. You're getting a more legit U22. So the question to me on this one, Stu, is how comfortable would you feel having 3 of our 4 U22 spots taken up by defensive players? Does that matter to you? Does that impact or limit our ability in what you would like to see this club do in using these U22 slots? Or if we have 4 U22 signed, then we can't go back to 3 DPs. So we're looking at only 2 DPs. Does 3 U22s on the defensive side, being Durkin, JGR, and potentially one of these other left-footed defenders, is that problematic to you?
No, not at all. I think you're going to use them somewhere. So you're going to try to find value on a player who's coming in for a U22, who's, again, you can possibly sell on in the future. So where you find a value for them where they can contribute, you're going to have to raise the talent floor of that squad throughout the whole squad this summer and over the winter. And I think that's more of a winter objective. So I don't have a problem with that, just looking at what they're saying he's capable of. I'm just trying to think of, with our glut of injured center backs, exactly where he fits. Because when we have incomings, it means we're going to have outgoings as well.
Yeah.
And we do have an international roster slot with Giannis Horn leaving. We have 7 out of 8.
Yep.
So we could possibly we'll get into it, buy out someone to free up another one. But all 4 of these players would require an international roster spot.
Correct. The fourth being Teodoro Sebastian Ars, who is more of an attacking player. And I would say that's the questionable one of City 2 supplemental roster slot. What does that look like? Just the fact that we're targeting a Paraguayan right-footed left winger. The right-footed left winger gives me pause a little bit because we're already stocked up somewhat deep in left wing position in Celio and Silva. So right wing, right midfielder is kind of where a lot of us had been wondering if we're going to make a move. Teodoro Ars, or Teo, as I understand he's nicknamed, we don't know if he's going to be a City 2 target, but the profile of a right-footed, primarily left winger who can play any of the attacking positions, that's interesting. And the goal-scoring prowess recently is a lot better than historically. So over the course of his career, 105 appearances, 18 goals, 7 assists. That doesn't sound great. It doesn't light the world on fire. But then you look at the last 36 matches where he played primarily as a left winger. Last 36 matches, 10 goals. That's 10 goals in an MLS season. And that's not bad. We would take that. We would take that. That's the record for St. Louis so far. Yeah. Klaus and Nico Gioacchini is right there at 10 in our best season. And we were happy with that performance. So you get 10 goals in 36 games in MLS. All of a sudden, Ars is one of our best players, our most valued players. So don't write off too much about the 18 goals and 105 appearances. This is a player who, that lengthy body of work for a 25-year-old isn't there, but the last couple of years, the last year, that the production has been there. So that's probably what Lutz and company are looking at, is this recent production, the growth and evolution of Ars as a player. And honestly, he ticks a box. Like one of the more uncomfortable conversations that is occurring in the City fan base is the nationality of the players that we bring in. It makes me uncomfortable to go too deep into it. And I'll tell you why. It makes me uncomfortable because I don't like getting into the conversation of token players from certain regions as we have too many Germans. We need a South American. We have too many Americans. We need a European. We have too many Scandinavians. We need a Central American. Why? What does it mean other than you want to see maybe yourself represented in the team that you have? And that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's what you're saying, then that's what you're saying. If you're saying you want a South American that is a goal scorer, that can move with the ball, that can slice and dice defense, you can say that. But you can also have that from any other part of the world. There's an uncomfortableness to this conversation, and I cannot be the only one who feels it. Whenever somebody says we need to sign more South Americans, Celio and Klaus, they don't cut it. That we need more play. And if you're talking about the typical qualities that you get from players in certain regions of the world and how they play soccer, that's fine. But my God, there is a nuanced conversation to that is not coming out well on social media for a lot of City fans. And so I see a Paraguayan winger who has 10 goals in his last 36 matches, and I see what his profile is on the field, his ability to cut from right to left, to play overlapping, to control the ball really well in the attacking third in transition, scoring 10 goals in 36 appearances. The fact that he's a Paraguayan winger is fantastic because I want more people to see themselves in the team that we have. Diversity is a good thing, but I fundamentally dislike the black and white notion of we need to sign more players from a specific part of the world just to have a player from a specific part of the world on this team. And I feel like our club might have started off the wrong foot in that regard, where we signed a Bosnian, and it's really hard to find a narrative other than we signed a Bosnian for a St. Louis team that has such a rich and deep Bosnian fan base and culture and heritage that never performed anywhere near his expectations. So I'm jaded a little bit in that regard of just saying we need to have a player from a certain nationality. I don't want to go too much more into it. I just had to kind of get that off my chest in the conversation because I started to see things that I didn't really like how the narratives were going when specifically Teodoro's name was put out there. And then you start to say, well, that's not the South American that I wanted. I wanted a better goal scoring South American. I wanted one with a longer pedigree. I wanted a DP, because it starts to be a slippery slope in a lot of these conversations.
Oh, definitely. That's been a conversation I have steered clear of, thankfully, on X and Blue Sky.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of started out in a, maybe for some people in a different position. There are some who just want players from every nationality represented, which I understand.
Yeah.
And I think there are others who, my approach has always been, I want to see scouting in the areas, and it makes me a little uncomfortable if we don't have a presence or eyes on, say, all of South America, which isn't true. And if we're talking about things that make us a little uncomfortable, I've always been slightly uncomfortable with how Klaus is just written off as not being Brazilian because he's German Brazilian. He's a Brazilian. He's from Grêmio, and speaks Portuguese. So, it's exciting always when we bring in players. It's exciting when we get a player from a country who hasn't played for City before. Then we get to, the supporters can buy a flag of that nation and hang it up on one of the capo stands. And it's just fun hearing all the different stories and backgrounds of these guys. So hopefully we'll get to have, if Teodoro signs with City or City 2, we'll be able to get some cool stories about, Paraguay and where he's from, and maybe some local St. Louis, Paraguay transplants or something like that. So whatever happens, we'll get some good pierogi out of Gurgol signing. That would be interesting.
And there's a few news sources, and I'm not sure if they're independently reporting this about Teodoro, but there have been more than a few reporters and folks who I would say have decent followings on social media that are reporting St. Louis City's interest in him, making formal offers, though nothing's come out through Bogert, which means I don't know if the league office has anything on that yet. But like you said, it would take an international roster slot. The where he would land and where he'd be targeted would be an interesting conversation. The quality's there. I reposted a video on him the other day on X that I think really shows what he can do in transition in the attacking third, playing off the ball, especially getting open and then retaining control in the final third. A lot of exciting things that he could bring. So while a lot of our conversations right now, because we have 3 of the 4 rumors are left-footed defenders, this is an exciting attacker, no matter how you slice it. And I think he offers a lot of creativity, a lot of off-the-ball movement and speed, as well as ball handling that can really help us out left or right side, no matter how that would turn out. So Stu, we know it's probably hard to see all 3 of those left-footed defenders land here. We've got our big takeaway that we're targeting a left-footed defender. The elephant in the room, though, is who we don't have rumors on. And here's where I have to say that just because you haven't heard a rumor doesn't mean we're not in the market for somebody. And I'm talking about central midfield. I'm talking about right mid, right wing, another forward even. The fact that we haven't heard a rumor of these players just could potentially mean that nobody has a vested interest in leaking this out. Leaks don't come typically from St. Louis's side unless they're almost across the line. Like our friend Manuel Veth loves to break news. That news always comes to fruition, which means it's pretty close to happening. In the early stages of conversations, I don't know if I ever recall information being leaked from the St. Louis side. It's always on the player, on the agent, on the other team side to try and get some kind of competitive advantage. So the fact that we haven't heard about those rumors I don't read into the fact that we're not seeking those positions. But the other side of it to me is, are we seeking those positions? We know we need help in central midfield, but the biggest question to me is, you could be targeting a central midfield. Let's talk about central midfield. You could be targeting a central midfielder to bring in, but what does that mean when your players get healthy? And you have to talk about not just the rest of the season, but the next season and the season after that of, of which central midfielders you expect to continue to have on your roster. There are a lot of different nuances to this story, and I'm not just talking about Edu Leuven, the fact that he's under contract until 2026 through 2026 with an option for 27. We know the off the field things that are going on right now that have taken his focus. He's also dealing with a hamstring injury, so it's not just like is the off the field things; it's legitimate injuries going on that is now keeping him out. Chris Durkin is currently on a U22 deal. He's making about $500,000 a year, and he's hitting the cap at about $200,000 because of this, because of the U22 contract. But his U22 contract is up after this year. It only goes through the age 25 season, and that's the season for Durkin. So there's going to be a increase in Durkin's salary hit. Is Durkin going to be worth, with his injury history, with how they project him, is he going to be worth keeping on and picking up his option for 26, knowing he's going to take up an extra $300,000 on the salary cap? That's a big question for central midfield. So if you are planning on some of these players sticking around, if you're planning on picking up the option for Durkin, if you're planning on relying on Leuven, if Thomas Ostrak is an option in central midfield, if you want to develop one of your City 2 players, or if you have Tyson Pierce play that position, or Cam Silly, or Seth Antwi, any of those players, they could be your depth options. But I don't know how you really get around playing in the transfer market when you have the Edu Leuven conversation in the air. I have no argument. I have no feeling. And that's why I struggle with, we have to find a central midfield option, because we have one of the best central midfielders in the entire game on a TAM deal right now. We have another great central midfield option on a U22 deal. Both of them are hurt. So it's managing injuries, it's managing contracts, and it's using the 20 roster slots that you can actually pay players for, quality, like high dollar value players, 20 roster slots for these positions. Alfredo Morales is another central midfielder. Contract's up after this year. We're going to get Julu Blom off the books. So that's in the upper $300,000. That's now off the books. If get Blom off the books, resign Durkin for next year, there's a wash right there. So there's a lot of puzzle pieces at play here in why we haven't heard of a central midfield rumor, for instance. I don't know, other than the fact that we need to make a call one way or another of, are we going to invest money to ensure as best we can that we have a quality or two quality central midfield options? And maybe that does look like having 4 players who are making a lot of money, and you can only play 2 of them because you're not going to be burned again with the injury issues that we've had. That is probably the question that I think a lot of fans have to reconcile with, is of the 20 roster slots, of the salary cap that this league is under, are you willing to devote $1 million for each player, $500,000 at least, $500,000 to $1 million in 4 players, where only 2 of them are going to be on the field at a time, just so you can ensure that you have a continuity plan if 1 or 2 goes down, or that you can have these sub options in the second half? It might sound easy on paper to say yes, but these roster slots come at a premium. And in a formation, a system where you're only playing 2 central midfielders like that, it's a valid question, because if you're going to pay that position 4 players that much money, at least, what are you going to do with your attack? You know, you're going to have to start searching for value somewhere, as opposed to being able to spend DP level money or TAM level money in some of these other positions. So this holistic conversation becomes really tough. And all that stems from the fact that we're wondering if City is targeting a central midfielder as a replacement, an augment to an enhancement to Leuven or Durkin because of their injury concerns, and how vital it is to replace that position with that quality this season, with the long-term plan in play as well, knowing that Leuven's under contract, that you might pick up Durkin's option. I don't know what the right answer is, but those are just kind of like stream of consciousness thoughts and things to consider when you're thinking through, does it make sense for City to sign a central midfielder of or better than the quality that Leuven or Durkin are? And what does it mean if you're still having those 2 players take up the amount of money they are on the current roster?
Oh, absolutely. And how much of this is also planning towards, say, if a guy like Wallum doesn't come back. Are we targeting guys to fill the holes in the central midfield, say looking at them in December, January, with their contract up next June, July? We've done that before. I can see that being the play where you hate to start the season off in a hole, but also you can get premium value for a lot of those guys on the transfer market. So maybe we don't see that this offseason. But when you're saying you pay top dollar for 4 players to fit 2 slots, I think you have to have those players have some sort of flexibility to fit in other roles if they're on the roster. With 20 roster spots, like you said, MLS, the way the roster is built, you can't have 2 quality players at every single position at a time. It's just not possible. So go ahead.
I would honestly say if we're talking central midfield, the spot to pay for is a 6, because that seems like from what I've seen in MLS, it is one of the hardest positions to find a consistent quality player for, like an out and out 6. And maybe Edu Leuven is that ideal player. Leuven could do so many other things throughout the midfield, in the attack as well. I'm talking about a destroyer, a 6 that can just neutralize offenses in the midfield that you're afraid of going after, and is proven in that position. So there aren't that many players who can play a 6 in that role in MLS. That would be a position that I'd be. Even Durkin, I don't even think Durkin is a prototypical 6 in that regard. That would be a position I'd be interested in. But beyond that, Stu, there's one other question that I had. As we're going to get out of here pretty soon. And I'm going to give a little recap of what we have on our roster so you have an idea of what we're going to play with. But the other big conversation is contract buyouts. And especially after what Toronto did this week. In case you missed it, Toronto FC bought out Bernadeschi and Insigne's contracts. 2 of the 6 highest paid players in Major League Soccer. They bought them both out. Both of them were massively underperforming, especially Lorenzo Insigne, who's the second highest paid player in Major League Soccer. And the stats I put on social media were pretty abysmal. Both of them combined in 4 years of MLS to have like 40 goals. And that's awful for 2 players who are the 2 of the 6 highest paid players in Major League Soccer. They bought out both of them. Both of them were making, like I said, $2 million, massive salaries. But the conversation always goes back on the St. Louis City side to Joachim Nilsson and Rasmus Alm because of their injuries. So I'm just going to say my piece real quick on my gut feeling of, do I realistically think that we're going to be using our contract buyouts on someone like Nilsson? Let's just look at Joachim Nilsson, because Joachim Nilsson is under contract until 2026, making $1.255 million. What I think is, honestly, no. I don't think we're going to be using our contract buyout while Joachim Nilsson is injured. Part of it is Lutz's history with some of these players in how, like Jabulu Blom, Selmer Pedro, instead of just cutting bait with them, he sends them on loan. He does what's best for the player. Lutz, in a lot of ways, and you can make arguments against this with guys like Tim Parker and Jake Nerwinski. Yes, you can. But there are also other examples of players like Jabulu Blom, like Selmer Pedro, Nukvi Thorson, who instead of being bought out because they had time remaining on their contract and they weren't going to fit into our plans for the future, he sends them on loan. Joachim Nilsson's hurt. Nobody's going to take him. And the quality that he potentially has. We've always known the potential that he has. I don't think because he's hurt and he won't land with another team that we're going to buy him out while he's injured. It's just my gut feeling, and you can say that shouldn't matter. You should be cold and callous. And if a player is not able to help your team and you're not expecting him to return, like David Critchley said, he's out for the foreseeable future and he's costing you 1.255. You got a transfer window coming up. Pay the $2+ million to buy him out for the rest of his contract and be done with him. Like, there's valid arguments to doing that from a sporting perspective and from a bottom dollar perspective. I can't. I would be shocked if Lutz actually pulled the trigger in the contract buyout for Joachim Nilsson in particular.
Yeah, one thing of note is both Insigne and Bernardacci's contracts were mutual pardons, I believe, mutual termination.
Yeah.
So obviously mutual means the player and the club decide and agree to that. The other way that contract buyouts work, to my knowledge, is you have to pay the whole fee remaining on the contract. So yeah, Nielsen with that extra year, like you said. Yeah, I don't see it either. I think Rasmus Alm is a much likelier candidate, given his health history and maybe how he could find a club in Scandinavia in the middle of their season over there. Maybe he could use 6 months to get healthy and join at the start of their season in March, maybe a Norwegian or Swedish club. But it's tough. Nielsen also has his green card, so he doesn't quite have the same baggage as, or not baggage, drawbacks as a guy like Rasmus Alm, who absolutely dynamic when he's been healthy, but he's never been healthy.
That's a good point. And so let's wrap this episode up by kind of looking and resetting the stage for what St. Louis has to work with. With these 4 rumored players, all of them would take an international roster slot. 3 of them left-footed defenders, 1 of them a right-footed left winger. We have 1 senior roster slot open right now, 2 supplemental roster slots open, 1 international slot, and 2 U22 slots if we retain our current roster construction model. As we've talked about plenty of times, Major League Soccer has 2 types of roster construction models you can follow. One is a DP, where you can have 3 DPs and 3 U22s. The other is a U22 model, where you can have 2 DPs, 2 DPs, 4 U22s, and $2 million in GAM over the course of a season that they give you. It's conditional GAM, so you have to use it over a certain amount of time. But the idea now is that we are in the U22 model for at least the first half of the season. Teams can change that model during the summer transfer window. So currently we have Marcel Hartl and Klaus taking up our 2 DP slots. We have Chris Durkin and Jake Girdwood-Reich taking up 2 of our 4 U22 slots, and we've already been given $1 million in GAM. We would just basically not be given that extra $1 million of GAM if we went back to the DP model. Klaus will not be a DP after this season. If we pick up Klaus's option, he will be reclassified as a TAM level player because his transfer fee that we originally paid, $3.5 reportedly $1 million back in the day, that was over the life of his guaranteed contract. And his guaranteed contract ends this year. His option will knock him down to a TAM level player. That'll open up a DP slot just by itself for next season. We can't alter that for this transfer window. So if we sign a new DP in this transfer window, we will have to move to the 3 DP, 3 U22, no GAM roster construction model. That's a big consideration. And so far from the players that we've seen rumored, it seems more likely that we're going to load up on 1 or 2 more U22 type players, at least at the center back role, potentially a winger role. I don't think anybody would bat an eye on adding at least 1 more U22. Any other questions or comments or things you want to say on our roster, Stu, before we get out of here?
No, just it'll be interesting. I think the rest of the season, the most interesting thing is going to be the roster build for St. Louis City. Not to say that we don't have a mathematical chance to make the playoffs, because we do, but the roster is what I'm going to be watching the closest personally.
Yeah, the priorities for the club in how who they send out, who they bring in, what the contracts look like over this season, over the next couple of weeks. Yeah, that's going to be one of the more fascinating things to watch. And stay tuned to Flyover Footy for all of it. We're at training multiple times a week. We'll bring you the player news as we get it, the transfer rumors and news as we get it, and try to do some of the analyzing of the data that we get and really look at what it means big picture for St. Louis. There's a lot of shifting priorities right now in how they construct this roster. We've talked about the massive amount of contracts that are ending after this season, with almost all of them have options. So there could be a bit of a remake of this roster that begins in this summer, but a lot of it also depends on if we're going to find buyers for certain players on our team, like Josh Arrow, like Kyle Hebert, are some of the players that have options that we don't expect to be picked up, who haven't been playing or that have been perennially injured. What's that going to look like? So this summer is Lutz always mentions summer transfer window as the window to make moves on. That is because contracts have ended in Europe and a lot of main contracts have ended in June. there's opportunity in the market. I don't know if that opportunity exists this year like it did last year, but I do know that we are going to make at least one, if not more moves. So stay tuned for us on that as well. Thank you for joining us on Flyover Footy for this preview of Real Salt Lake and a massive look at some of the roster construction, the rumors in the transfer window that opens again on July 24th. So that's a key date to remember for when we can actually make some of these official. Now, they can be announced ahead of time. I want to be very clear that transfers can and deals can be announced as official ahead of time, either by the club or confirmed. But the pen to paper player cannot come to and appear in training and for the club and matches until the transfer window opens on July 24th. Key date to remember. Other than that, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the match. Happy Independence Day, and we hope you have a great weekend, great safe weekend, and enjoy the game. For Stuart Holgren, my name is Matt Baker. We'll talk to you later. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and sticking with us. Hopefully we covered enough currently going on. It's still early in the cycle, right, Stu? I mean, like, there's rumors now, but there's so much speculation. There's very little firmness to talk about right now.
And then it'll move fast when it moves fast. So still got a while to go in the, European window dictates a lot as well. So we'll see.
That I didn't even talk about the fact that it's mismatched so horrendously. What is the English transfer window? Or the European? I'm going to look it up real quick. European transfer window, summer 2025.
Well, they were talking about changing it again to the start of the Premier League season, but I believe it's still August, correct?
Well, I think they changed it because of the FIFA Club World Cup as well. So there was that mini opening. It said...
But that was restricted to certain clubs, right?
Right. It closes on September 1st. I know that.
Well,
it's a lot of the things I'm reading say June 16th until September 1st.
Yeah, the main window is open now.
Yeah, and it goes till September 1st.
Yeah. Oof. It's a long way.
Yeah. So it's a long window. But yeah, we've heard rumors of players from all kinds of different countries. I'll reinforce the biggest thing: left-footed defender. It's clear we want to sign one of those. We're still in search of possible kind of push for Jay Reid, but definitely looking to reinvigorate our backline with youth. That's obviously true. So we're going to get out of here, though. But yeah, happy 4th of July, everyone. Be safe. Have a great weekend, no matter where